Okay, let's have open forum because we're a little late. Anybody? No? Wow. Okay. Well, I guess we'll get underway then. Uh,
So I got solicited again to come to CEDIA in September. Anyone else going?
Not I. I'm not a member. Do you have to be a member or?
No.
Huh. No, I'm not solicited, but what are they about?
It's a big trade show. It tracks around 20,000. It's sort of a small version of the Consumer Electronics Show, focusing on high-end equipment for the rich and famous.
Is it audio, video?
Yeah, CEDIA is the Custom Electronic Dealers and Installers Association.
Okay.
People who would typically build a home theater from 50,000 to 5 million.
Out of my range. uh, I wasn't planning on going. Where is it?
Denver.
Eh, that's a slog. Kevin Willoughby has assumed the screen. I'm not hearing anything. Are you muted or how does that work?
Can anybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
My headphone won't work, so might as well.
Is that just a gamer headset?
No, it's just a headset. It's
I've been thinking about getting one so that I can hear better and the microphone pickup is better, but I don't know what to get, so I haven't pulled the trigger yet.
I would recommend this one, but not.
I wonder if you use like the little microphone jack and a headphone jack, whether you have to futz around with system settings to choose the right output device and all that kind of stuff.
I pressed search for sound on my computer, and it took me to a definition of vibrations that move through the air.
Well, now you know.
I just have a simple Apple computer, which means I don't have to mess too much with system settings. All I do is plug my headphones, standard old headphones. I'm using a pair of Meza 99s right now that has, everybody complains about too much bass, but hey, I hear the bass. So extra bass is good for me because I can hear it. So.
Not a bad thing.
Jack Reed, what have you got over your lens?
Who are you talking to?
Jack Reed.
He's got like an overall blur of some kind. Or it's very steamy. Are you in the sauna? Jack Reed, you are muted.
Oh,
That's interesting. Yes, David Weinberg used to go to CEDIA regularly. I don't know if he does anymore.
I did see him there previously, but not last year.
Yeah.
By the way, if you're looking for a good wired headset, I have a Jabra, Jabra, also Plantronics. Both are good brands.
Okay. I'll make a note of that. I'll check them out. Jack Reed, if you're talking, we can't hear you, and your face is blurred out. So you're obviously
Well,
having.
Jack has put in a background, and his own camera looks like it has a filter over it.
Yeah. I recognize that hall in his background. He talked about that hall. I don't remember what it is, but
Yeah, that, can you hear me, anybody?
Yeah,
Okay,
yes, now.
I just turned on my microphone. I'm struggling with the camera, the visual, but it's pretty easy to turn the,
have you cleaned the lens?
no. I'll try wetting my thumb and rubbing it and see what else I can do here.
Well, it looks like you're in ghost mode.
It look, it,
That's
It-
improving.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
got better.
yeah, ghost is coming back from the dead here. What it looks like. I think yeah, it's getting squeaky clean. I had no idea. That's, of course,
That's scary stuff.
Oh, look at that.
yeah, I guess people who know me can now recognize
How
me,
many
but
years of dirt did you take off?
I don't know. It felt fairly rough. I don't know what the heck got stuck on there. Let me turn on some lights.
That's better.
There you go. Get some light on my face. I'm going to get light is shining in my eyes. I'm on the kitchen counter here. Just
Oh, that's the
here-
problem, being in the spotlight. The light's in your eyes.
say what? Say
When-
what?
It's the problem of an actor. They got the spotlight on them.
Yeah. Yeah, acting is a lot harder than I thought, but some people can't seem to leave it alone. But here in the central plains, we are in a different time zone. So I'm sitting in my kitchen counter trying to eat lunch with wires and whatnot all over the place. Let me so long as I don't try to chew on anything, they're pretty tough. I'm gonna put a hat on so I can keep the kitchen light out of my face and I can see everything. But yeah, that's a famous background. I'm still willing to try to field questions, but I would like to put up someday an organized presentation. But we have another agenda today, so I'm going to put off my headphones. I'll be right back.
All right. Anybody else? Open
Dave
forum?
Moran here.
Just wondered what the hall was in the background.
We'll ask him when he comes back.
I think he mentioned it once. Someplace, is it in Chicago?
Could be. Jack, what hall
Yes.
is that?
Say what?
What hall is that that's your background?
That is the so-called auditorium theater, modestly called the auditorium, is over the only one, but it was when it was built in 1890 on the south edge of the Chicago downtown district called the Loop, after an elevated railway, which was also goes around the downtown district. It's still there. This is not my picture, but one I found on the internet is really good, I think. But it shows. In fact, I'm gonna take myself out of the picture now that I've become visible. I'm gonna become invisible. Oh, okay. I think I'm going to leave that alone. Shall I talk about it a little bit? You had a few questions. Now you can at least see it. Although I'm looking at Nick, but I see that my background is in a little tile up at the top.
Is it a opera house?
It's an opera house, yes.
Yeah.
Therefore, it needs a concert show. It does not have one. but you can see down the lower left corner there, a small opening. The Theodore Thomas Orchestra, shortly thereafter called the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, played in there for a while, but they had trouble. You know, they both want to rehearse in the performance space, and they kept clashing about that. Everybody liked the results, people liked the theater, et cetera, et cetera. But so Orchestra Hall was built by a different architectural firm whose name I'm repressing at the moment. But in my opinion, it's a really bad hall. One of the worst I've ever had to put up with. I thought that Avery Fisher Hall was a big improvement. Carnegie Hall just blows me right away. It's for me, it's the best hall I've ever been in. One of the things I liked about Avery Fisher was that whatever I could see is exactly what I heard, and vice versa, in terms of angle and distance. The performers were right there. Now, an orchestra hall, for God's sake, even if you sit a little to the one side of the center line, the instruments tend to be displaced both laterally and vertically. The basses sound like they're standing at the back of the choir terraces, chorus terraces, which are built behind the stage, and it's the weirdest sort of thing. If I managed to get a center seat, I mean, I don't have great buying power, but I would never buy a subscription for such a place. I only go in there when something quite unusual is happening. For example, one thing was really rather weird in this acoustic environment is that Pierre Boulez had decided he would conduct the Berlioz Requiem in this place. This is one of the two live performances of that Requiem I've ever heard. The other one was beautiful acoustics in a huge field house at Northwestern University, north of the city, where they had exactly what Berlioz prescribed: 4 brass bands spread out at the 4 corners of the cross, which in the cathedral, 17 kettle drums in a row across the front of the stage.
Oh man.
Where they had the rest of the orchestra. Behind us, behind the audience, at the very south end of this pattern, there was a platform or something. I think it was built there originally. You come in under that, come through the door into the space, and there was the children's chorus. As it happens, I got there a few minutes late, and they were already singing. My undergraduate friends, I jumped in my car when I was undergraduate, to be in the 50s, brought them up there. They were absolutely, they didn't know, they thought I was, they're ready to go on a little jaunt, a little study break with Crazy Jack. So we all piled into my car and drove from the south side of Chicago up to this northern suburb. And we tiptoed in as the first movement, which has a children's chorus in it. And they were absolutely charmed. What was, of course, most impressive is when some people think the brass bands play the whole time, but of course they only play in one movement. But when they got going, that was very impressive too. I mean, Northwestern has a conservatory, which where they have the players, and it was just a smashing good show. It's such a, and the memory, as you can see, has got me slightly unhinged. So I'm babbling away here. I'm supposed to be talking about the auditorium theater, which, as I say, must have had a concert shell when Theodore Thomas formed his orchestra and played in there. But I've never seen or heard anything of it. So what you have is if there's an orchestra on stage, the sound goes up in the fly space. It doesn't come forward. And even worse, the management, which is Roosevelt University now, reduces that space by hanging a curtain halfway down, which makes the situation even worse. Unknown to them, the Royal Philharmonic came through on tour. And they inadvertently demonstrated the acoustics of the place. The personnel showed up half an hour after concert time. And one of the personnel came down to the front of the apron, and in his wonderful upper class British elocution, he addressed us patiently and apologetically without a microphone. When he'd finished his little apology, he said, "Could you all hear that?" And we took breath together and said, "Yes." And the little man jumped because we had about 1,000 people in the place, and he wasn't expecting to hear us, but we had some idea that we would hear him. Okay, and another half hour we waited, and the Philharmonic set up on stage and began to play. And I must say, I could hear the string players, the downstage string players, plus the trumpets, which were towards the back of the stage, but that's about all. And you just have to do it right, but they're not doing it right in this place. Nevertheless, I like to apprise people in the Northeast who are familiar with Symphony Hall in Boston and some other halls as well, some other what I call shoebox halls. I included Avery Fisher, which is the only shoebox I've been in so far, if that's a fair designation.
So you haven't been to Boston Symphony? Is that why you didn't mention?
That's right. I haven't got in there yet. Someday, if I live long enough, I'm 86. I'm starting to fail physically, but here I am, vigorously ranting on the internet. But that misfire of the Royal Philharmonic persuaded me that the acoustics aren't bad, and I'm in there as a dance fan, as a ballet fan. And they do hang backdrops at the back of the stage space, and they do pull the reducer curtain all the way up. And as you may know, ballerinas have hard toes in their shoes. So when they dance on their toes, there's a characteristic knocking sound. And it turns out that the toe steps are just as wonderfully audible when the ballerinas are all the way up stage as when they are down towards the front. This is not a very good test, I would say. I don't have to lecture the BAS about the shortcomings of impulse testing of acoustics in rooms. You really need a good analyzer to analyze all that. Yeah. But I could hardly wait to get in there when the stage is properly set up for a musical performance. But you do see the upsweep of the seats. Yeah. And this is according to the isoacoustic curve that Dagmar Adler knew about. Someday, if I live long enough, I will present and I will reread and maybe even post as a message 2 articles which I have about Dagmar Adler. He didn't write very much, but he did toward the end of his acoustical career, which is rather short. He described how he thought these halls should be designed. His career was cut short by the crash of '93, I think it was. His illustrious partner, Louis Sullivan, who is known somewhat in the East for his beautiful ornamentation, was an uncompromising bachelor. And he didn't quite starve to death because he wouldn't take any commissions except ones that suited his high principle, Gesundheit. But Dagmar Adler, by the time the crash came, had 6 kids to take care of. And so he retired, I guess, as far as I know, from acoustic design and moved to Cleveland to work for the Otis Elevator Company. And that was the end of his career. He had to do it. Elevators were new. There weren't any elevators put in this building when it was built. There are some in there in the corner of the property right now. But the upsweep of the seats is the isoacoustic curve that was proposed by a Scotsman whose name I have repressed, but I believe he published his ideas as early as 1830. And Adler, I should count up, in order the number of theaters that Adler and Sullivan built, because this one is way along the list. This one was built a couple of years after a 6,000 seat opera house was built in Chicago's Lakefront Park, Grant Park, and of course, built in around maybe around 1885 or so. There is no amplification, but people loved it. It was not intended to last. It was built out of timber and staff, which is a mixture of plaster and horsehair. It was not, but at the end of the season, it was supposed to be torn down. And people heard about it, and there was an uproar. They said, no, wonderful, keep it, save it. So they saved it, and they had another opera festival the following summer, which must have been, 1888 or so, roughly, by which time the place was starting to fall down. So they said, okay. And then they got together this place, which seats 3,000, and it's all indoors. And you notice those arches in the upper left corner, those are, I also don't have to lecture the BAS about the advantages of having sound not go up as far as a high ceiling, but to be caught so that I've forgotten do I want to say transit time, the time it takes the sound to get from the source to bounce off a reflection, which is what these arches form, and gets back into the audience. Now, if that happens quickly, within a certain number of milliseconds, the listeners in the audience will fuse the sensation of the two sounds coming directly from the stage and also from not too far overhead. And that's the purpose of these arches. They are not structural. In fact, they hang from structural trusses which span the structural box in which this large theater, as I say, 3,000 seats, is constructed. So it's rather unusual from the Symphony Hall model. And I don't know, maybe I should shut up at this point and get more stuff together. I'm riffing from memory so far, but I do want to point out these essential differences to the probably the most familiar auditorium that most of the BAS is familiar with. It's very different.
Yeah. No, that would be interesting. Think about doing that.
By the
Well,
way,
I do say what?
architecturally, it's very, very famous for a couple of reasons, because Louis Sullivan is considered the inventor of the steel skyscraper. And this
Yes.
actually is, if I remember right, stone construction. And his other reason for fame is that Frank Lloyd Wright worked for him.
Yes.
And one of the few architects that Frank Lloyd Wright respected, actually calling him Liebermeister.
Frank Lloyd Wright had very little good to say about most architects.
He
But
loved Sullivan.
he worked for Sullivan, and I think it's bad German, but my dear master, Liebermeister, there is one other architect, though, since you brought it up, I'm going to rattle on it for a moment. Toward the end of his life, somebody asked Frank Lloyd Wright whether all the people, not all men, but all the people who work with him or for him, were there any of them that he liked or that he recommended? And without hesitation, he said, Barry Byrne. Barry Byrne came to Wright's Oak Park studio as an office boy, a teenager. And he caught the bug, and he worked for Wright. And Wright went on to say, Barry Byrne, he emulated my principles without imitating my style. You would look at Barry Byrne's work, and it's worth looking up. He had a long, successful career with the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Chicago, thanks to a friendship with Bishop Kelly. but he evolved pretty much his own style. I would like to say something about the invention of the steel high-rise, though. There were steel high-rise buildings built in New York at the same time. The technology became available thanks to steel production not far east of New York City. In Chicago, steel was produced at the south end of Lake Michigan, which brought the ore, where the boats brought the ore down from Minnesota. So, but the thing about Sullivan, to quibble a little bit, was that he invented the steel skyscraper as a tall building artistically expressed. What they built in New York, some of the first ones looked like stacks of historic buildings piled one on top of each other. It was a tall building, but if you looked at it, it looked like a bunch of short buildings stacked up. If you look at the Wainwright building in St. Louis, it looks like a tall building. Sullivan's facade emphasized vertical lines, and the spandrels between the windows are recessed behind these vertical lines, and there you have the people say it's the first tall building. They said, wait a minute, and then you have to add artistically expressed, because I think that's one of the I'll say it, one of the cornerstones. It's a good place to say that. It's one of the cornerstones of modern architecture, is that the internal structure should be expressed externally. Of course, Mies van der Rohe carried this to its great conclusion, because by the time Mies van der Rohe started working, we had steel which could be exposed itself on the outside, did not have to be protected against the elements, because in the early steel, I think it started to rust.
Except Mies's steel on the outside was actually decoration.
Yeah, part of it was he had in the exterior facade, those were curtain walls.
Yes.
Okay, and he expressed that aspect of the curtain wall because he cut them off before they touched the ground. You knew when you looked at the building, the external wall did not hold the building up. But I forget whether the right term is mullions, but he had I-beams going up the outside of the building at intervals, and he was taken to task later in his career because computers were brought in, and some architect engineers, Mies used to say that's all structural, and some young Turks in the crowd said, wait a minute, Mies, we did a structure analysis on this building, and the building would be just as strong if you took out every other external I-beam. They're very slim. The supporting columns are back inside. He revealed those too. And Mies's famous or notorious remark said, when he was confronted with this structural engineer, said, when he said that, so why did you put the I-beams running up the outside? They're not necessary. If you could leave every other one out. And Mies's famous comment was, "Well, ja, but that ruins the rhythm." The rhythm, got that? You can't see me holding up my finger.
Can we get on with the meeting?
Yeah, I'll shut up and just, I like to finish the sentence. I'll shut up. But the rhythm is an aesthetic judgment, and it's not engineering. Okay, yeah, okay. I'm way overdue. I'll shut up now, and I'll come back sometime.
All right. Anybody else have a quick topic for?
Sorry about that.
No. Okay. Well, the topic of this meeting is AXPONA 2024 report.
I had a project I'm kind of working on making. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can I talk a little bit about my project?
Yes.
I'm making a test CD. The idea is to use it for testing phono preamps. It would have a series of tones on it, which has the inverse RAAA built into it. So you can play this back and it plays into a phono stage. And if it phono stage has flat response, then you'll get equal tones coming out. I don't think anybody's done this before. It turned out to be a little more complicated than I thought. In a wave editor, you can type in frequency, amplitude, and duration and generate test tones. But the amplitude, it turns out it rounds off to maybe 2 digits, which is not really accurate enough. And so I talked to Gary Galo, and he has some information on that. He made a CD of his own to test pre-emphasis and de-emphasis on CD players. And he's helping me, and we'll try to make this work.
So no one ever wrote a test specification for RIAA?
Well, we know the numbers. It's just nobody's made a CD that you could play back and test the phono input. You usually use an inverse RIAA network, a passive network. But this would allow anybody to do it without a generator or a network. So I'm working on that.
That's cool.
That's all.
Okay, anybody else got a quick topic? All right, well, on with the report, I guess. I'm gonna try sharing my screen. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if so these are the stats here. It was in Schaumburg, Illinois, which is outside of Chicago. Hello. Okay. 200 listening rooms and over 10,000 attendees this time. That's last time I went was a couple of years ago. The convention center is at the Renaissance Hotel, and they used a significant proportion of the volume for the actual convention. At the end, they were offering rooms for people to stay in, but they're pretty high priced. First and second floor have ballrooms, which means they're 50 foot or more square and like 30-foot ceilings. Can you imagine that's not ideal for sound? But there it is. This is a picture of the outside here. It's a pretty modern place, very nice. And you can't see it to the left of this picture is all parking, a lot of parking. And the roadways in front are circular so that buses come through and cabs come through and shuttles come through. It's pretty well thought out. Inside it's modern. Here, one of the interesting things in the lobby here, they hang these canopies, which are filmy stuff, but I think they absorb sound. You can see there's a row of them here. You can only see this one is in the center, but there's ones to the left and ones to the right. The fireplace is kind of neat. It's this structure here, and the fire is down here. It's kind of hidden behind this tree here, but and a lot of partitions in the lobby. So there's a lot of seating and small group areas, and people meet there and have lunch and whatnot. And I stayed at the Spring Hill Suites because I couldn't get a room at the Hyatt. It was very good, a little more expensive than the Hyatt, but it was worth it. I met some really friendly people, so that was nice. And it was convenient because they had a shuttle that ran day and night to the Renaissance, which is 3/4 of a mile away. So I entered the Renaissance. It's a Friday through Sunday show, and this was the first thing I came across. I go from right to left, bottom floor, and keep going up. And this is an optical phono cartridge. They've been around for a few years, but this is one of the nicer ones. And you can see the front end of the cartridge here is glowing green. And I don't know if that's the actual, I don't know, signal light. They use an LED, and the stylus is connected to a photo interrupter between the LED and a photodiode, or a pair of photodiodes. So the first sound room I went to was one of the high-end guys. You see, I got the prices of things here when I could find them. Last time at AXPONA, I had suggested that every room have a sheet which lists all the equipment and the prices at least, and suggested if they had promotional brochures at least on display, so people could say, "Oh wow, it's got two woofers," or whatever they wanted to know. But very few of them did that. The room, all my pictures I took with a little Canon point and shoot camera. It's nothing special. It's not an SLR or anything like that. And I did not turn on the flash because I hate getting flashed. And so these are giant speakers. All giant speakers weigh 500 pounds apiece. That's a new rule. And they were playing music. It was like Viking chants. And while they were impressive, I couldn't relate to it. I couldn't tell. I mean, the voices. They have a subterranean bass singer, and I don't know. There's names like baritone and bass, but there's got to be something else. And it put out a tremendous amount of sound. But hey, I want to hear a symphony orchestra, so I couldn't tell you whether the sound was great. I could tell you that they didn't form an image. So. The next room over, also these are Wilson speakers, and these had a good sound. They were playing orchestral stuff, and I could pick out orchestral sections spread out in space, and the spectrum was pretty well covered from low to high, and as as you went from cellos playing low to high, the image didn't shift and jump around, and I was impressed by this. That's a turntable. The picture is not good because the room is very dark. Like I said, I don't like to use a flash, but it comes with its own stand here, and as you can see, the top of the thing looks like a linear travel arm, and then there's a turntable at this level, and then this is all stand. There's a giant. It must be 200 pounds of weights here, pulling this thing down to settle it on, I think it's just 3 feet, maybe it's 4. Can't really tell, but it weighs 800 pounds, 275,000 bucks. And you want to use this to play records with? It doesn't make any sense to me. It sounded okay. It's just a record. So, I don't know. Sonus Faber is an Italian speaker manufacturer, and they have Boulder amps here they're being driven by, and these sounded really nice. They were playing some pop stuff. Sade is the name of a jazz singer, and these things could swing, and they put out plenty of deep bass. You see, the amps cost a lot more than the speakers. Boulder amps are well known. I mean, these are probably like 500 watts a channel monoblocks. B&W was there. They always have a nice room. Last year, it wasn't, 2 years ago, it wasn't quite as nice. This year it was better because they had a wall behind the speakers. And they had a sub in each corner, and the subs were killing it. They were putting out huge amounts of bass, way too much bass. And so they kind of drowned the rest of the sound. This is lower end, reasonable kind of prices. PSB, Paul S. Barton from Canada, has these speakers at only 12,000 bucks a pair. And they sounded very good. And one of the interesting things is you see that they are set up to fire out of a corner. And what you can't see is behind the electronics is this small subwoofer with two 8-inch opposing drivers, and it was very well dialed in with the speakers, and it produced a lot of nice, even, powerful bass. I really like that. The Estelons are one of my favorites. One of the things I noticed about the room this year, as I did 2 years ago, is when people come in, they stop talking. They are just listening because, honestly, they're captured by the sound. Some people are rude, but the people really just didn't talk when these things were playing, and they played good music, good female vocals like Joni Mitchell again, and some symphonic stuff, and I think they even played some pop, but I didn't really stick around for that. These have cast artificial marble or stone of some kind cabinets, and they're different looking. I mean, they're not your monkey coffin, they're not a box, but they really work. They get the tweeter at the right height. The tweeter is below the two drivers you see on the front face there, and boy, they sound great. And it had, great looking and great working electronics. No strain, no noise, nothing I could, have a problem with. And on that front wall, that shapy looking thing is an acoustic diffuser. It's made out of slats of wood that have been cut to implement it's like a stone dropped in the water kind of pattern, it's a ring pattern, which will do some diffusion and probably has some spectral artifacts because, this has a certain size and that is a certain size and so forth. But overall, I thought the sound was well presented. They have bass traps, curtains all around, and as you see, the 20-foot high or 30-foot high, this is the top of that front of the wall stuff. These are 25 or 30 feet high. They're not treated there. I think this is a sound panel, but it's a very large room to energize, and they succeeded. And when you look at the price of these things, one of the things that stunned me was the cost of the cables is more than the cost of the speakers. And that makes no sense to me. You don't need to spend you don't need to spend more than $1,000, I'm sure, on cables. But people do. It's crazy. I saw this neat, I will say, tube phono preamp, and it's carved out of a solid block of aluminum here. Okay, you see this is all cut away from it. And the engineering is beautiful. 1, 2, 3 tubes on one side, 1, 2, 3 on the other. These little things, the tubes have these little nips on the end, and these are vibration mounts to keep these things from wiggling around because tubes are microphonic. And it's beautiful construction, but tubes, I mean, who needs tubes? Not for this. You can get better sound, better noise figures out of solid state stuff. A nice looking tube amp. Nobody needs tubes. Nice looking turntable. It's a reasonable design compared to that monstrosity we saw earlier. But one of the interesting things is here is where the motor is, right under here, which is right under where your cartridge goes. Now, when you start playing, this is a 12-inch platter, you start playing, your cartridge is moved away from the motor, but still I found that kind of an interesting choice for them to make in a design. PS Audio had a tremendous large display. They've been known for electronics for a long time, but now they make speakers, and so they wanted to promote these. And again, they were set up in a corner firing system. This is the corner here, and one wall here, and one wall here, and it had diffusion around and curtains around, all around the room. And here is the full frontal view of the stuff they were using for this room. They make these power regenerators, which take AC, turn it into DC, and regenerate AC. And they cost a lot of money. And they have a pair of stereo amps and their stack of drive electronics, a streamer, a preamp, and DSP, I think. And these are a pair, they're middle-sized speakers. They make bigger ones, but they all have this consistent mid-range ribbon design, a couple of front-firing woofers, and on the sides, you can only see it here, a passive radiator. And they're playing music I didn't really relate to. They're playing things like gongs and bells and things that, show you transient response and high frequencies, but, not symphonic stuff to use all the drivers at the same time. But that's what they like to do. So one of the things, when they were playing certain things, these passive radiators on the side were going crazy. They're going excursions of quarter to a half an inch in each direction, just pumping like mad. I don't know why that is, but obviously they need to have a low pass, high pass filter on them. This is one of their regenerators, and this is the spec sheet or the list of equipment. As you see, the regenerators are 10 grand, and the speakers that you showed there that I listened to were 20 grand, and seems like a lot of money. Way out of my league, anyways. Griffin Audio is there. Interestingly, again, as 2 years ago, these are just on stands. They're not connected to anything. They're not playing any music, obviously. And I don't know why they wouldn't do that. This is the biggest physical amp I remember seeing. I think this is like 3 feet deep and 2 feet across and 15 inches high. It weighs 400 pounds. Kind of a shame. They make speakers now, and this is a new model. And again, not connecting anything, not making any sound. They had a small room with a small model of these, but these are on display, and you can't really see it here, but imagine that there's a rail going top to bottom here on the left and the right side, and there's a carbon fiber skin attached to that rail that goes around, wraps around the speaker, but it's not anchored to the speaker in the back. And when I tapped on that thing, it rang. I'm sorry, it was resonant. And I tried to say, why did you build this way? And the guy who was in charge of this room just kept saying, go to our demo room and you'll hear. And I decided I didn't want to bother. The show is so big, you'll see my conclusion. I saw a third to a half of it, maybe. Stenheim had one of these big ballrooms, and this is their big speaker. Solid aluminum cabinet. I mean, the walls are half an inch thick, but there's aluminum bracing. These red things are horizontal bracings, and these are sort of pro type woofers and MTM or MWT WM design, and they sounded great. They didn't seem to have tremendous amount of low bass, but they're only playing sounds with a turntable, and it took them 5 minutes to play a track because they had to take off the clamps, clamp on the center, clamp on the edge, take off the previous disc, put on a disc, clean the disc, clamp the edge, clamp the center, and so there was little music being played, and it was playing on these giant tube amps, which, don't care. But when these things played a kick drum, I felt it in my chest. I call it a punchy sound. So they definitely do mid bass, and I think they do low bass as well, and they sound very clean. This was another ballroom, and I think this is an Asian fantasy kind of speaker. You're looking like at a 5-way speaker with 7 drivers, if I counted right. This is a bass horn. The driver is here, and it points up, and it folds forward. It's a big circular 5-foot diameter horn, and it's 4 feet above the ground. This is a mid-bass horn. It's maybe 3 feet in diameter. I don't know. And the driver is behind here facing forward. This is a mid-range horn. These are 2 mid-tweets. This and this are the same, and high tweets are these horns here, and driven by all these amplifiers. This is a $4 million system. It was the most expensive thing there, and it did not sound good. I'm sorry. This is all the amplifiers behind. This is the symbol for ESD, and since it's on these, I take it that all these things with red panels here are ESD amplifiers and probably crossovers and DSP and stuff like that. These are the Auralic electronics that they said were being used, and have the same amount of promotion here. But I think a lot of people think that these are Auralics. But the real secret was behind these, one on each side, are these subwoofers. They look to me like Stenheims, because these bass horns are nowhere near big enough to make real bass. So the real bass is coming out of this, but it was very cleverly hidden. You had to look carefully to find them. So this is an Asian wet dream kind of speaker. They're bigger than ballrooms, big rooms, maybe 100 by 200 feet, where they have bunches of tables set up in a row, partitions between them and stuff like that. So I wandered around there, and one of the companies that caught my eye is called Metaxas and Sins. I don't know if that's an associated company or associated distributor or something like that, but they make these very artistic neo-noir things. I think this was a CD player, this is a tape deck, and this is a turntable, and there's these speakers, and they have very strange sculptural sort of models to design. They make a set of headphone equipment, and these are like skulls, and you can store your headphones on them, but there are knobs in the face of the skulls to control the sound. It's not my cup of tea. There's a large tape display. I thought that was interesting. RTM says they will sell you tape of any specification in any format. And so I thought that was interesting because there were several tape machines. My deal is speakers, and I did not spend much time on turntables, tapes, any other stuff. This room, lots of companies selling accessories. These are headphone stands and record clamps and footers and fluids and envelopes and so forth for discs. And of course, lots of vinyl, more vinyl. I figured there could have been 1 million LPs in there. One of the things I saw, and I marked them as display only because they're not connected to anything, these Phonica magnetic planar like Magnepan types, and they look nice and they look like they're well constructed, but they had like no information out about them. So back to a ballroom. There's this new to me company called Clarisys, which there was a display panel that I don't think I had a picture on. It said like reimagined and re-engineered and la-di-da, but they never said reimagined, re-engineered what. And I talked to a guy in charge of that room, and he really did not want to talk to me about what their roots are. Their roots are obviously apogee. And finally, in another room, I found another Clarisys display, and I talked to the guy and said, yes, we have reimagined apogee. And when I asked him about the patent disputes and the problems between apogee and Magnepan, which were the downfall of apogee, he didn't know anything. And he didn't know anything about the engineering of the speakers and stuff. It was kind of disappointing. But this was their high-end thing. They played loud, but one of the curious things is the woofers, normally in magnet planar, this aluminum foil bonded to Kapton or Mylon, suspended in front of a bunch of magnets, and the diaphragm has a track that goes back and forth as you move up and down, side to side, and it's positioned over the magnet fields of fringing and all that kind of stuff, so that this should move together, forward and backwards together as a plane. Those woofers were moving a lot more than I thought they should. They weren't using a turntable, and almost everybody used streaming, and most everybody played like little clips rather than whole songs. and only a couple of displays played classical music. So it was very hard to find something you'd listen to and get a handle on. But the sound jumped a little when you went up the spectrum, which is why I said the spectrum was a little disjoint. But they are very high tech looking if you're into that. They're big and they're very heavy, 500 pounds, like they're supposed to be. This is the inside of a CAT convergent audio technology preamp, and one of the things I loved about it, I hate that it's tubes, but I love this attenuator here. It's got like 60 positions, and it switches a bunches of resistors so that the attenuation is very tightly controlled and very well matched between the channels. You don't see that very often. This is one of my favorite speakers, the Credo Cinema, and what it is, there's a cabinet here and a cabinet here and another cabinet on the front, and this cabinet has 212 bass woofers one on each side, another 212s, one on each side, a bunch of mid-range, a bunch of tweeters, and it sounds lovely. Interestingly, I talked to a young man, and I said, why do they put the tweeters on the outside? Most line sources put the tweeters on the inside. And he said, I designed it that way. So he looked like he was in his 20s, maybe late 20s. And I don't know if he ever considered putting the tweeters on the inside. I think it would have helped the imaging because it's a little diffuse, but they played pretty loud. This amp here is like 1,000 watts a channel. So there's no lack of power. They played loud and clean, and as a line source, you know, the sound from a line source drops off only as 1 over R as opposed to 1 over R squared. So you have a much deeper direct field, and so the sound doesn't get a lot louder as you get closer, but it's very evenly spaced, distributed. One of my favorites. And I got them to play some Brahms First Symphony stuff, the end of the symphony actually, and the crescendos and the horns were magnificent. This year, Luxman, like a couple of years ago, was mated with Magico speakers, but this year they had this middle range size ones. The big ones a couple of years ago, boy, they didn't work for me. But these sounded great. And one of the secrets was, again, a hidden subwoofer. This is the Luxman sign here. And so behind that one and behind that one are these pretty powerful subs with 212s, and they're not powered subs. I don't remember what was driving them, but a couple hundred watts on each sub. And good deep bass, but it's kind of a trick, kind of a nasty trick if you ask me. This is getting close to the end of the ballrooms here. This is the Aurora speaker, and it's very, it was very dark in there, so the pictures are not great. This is a cube on which this thing is a horn stuck. And this is a Tractrix horn, which means it has a certain flare from the center of the horn to the out. And then they swirled the outer edge so that it meets up into this cube. And I don't know that that has any acoustic advantage, but it's pretty neat looking. And it looks like a cast stone of some kind. I don't know the weight of this, but I bet it's pretty heavy. And so there's this cube here, and this is a ribbon tweeter with a horn added on the front, and it's open in the back, so it's a dipole. And inside the cube, the back end is open, and you get a woofer, 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 woofer. So the woofers come out the side, and they don't come out the front, and they come out the back, and I think that might make this a cardioid sort of response speaker, not quite a dipole, but it was interesting. This is that mid-range horn. This is the driver, and this is the horn that it protrudes through the front with. And this is the back side of that ribbon tweeter showing. This is the ribbon here, and it's a little hard to see, but this edge here is that two sort of cylindrical, and I don't know if they're exponential or whatever. They look kind of like cylinders to me, but that would produce some kind of loading on it. And it sounded okay. It didn't quite hang together, but it could make a lot of bass. And one of the interesting things about the bass is this is the top plate this is the actual magnet, and this is the top plate of the woofer, and you see it's very thick, which leads me to think that it's an underhung woofer design, which means the voice coil is very short in this big plate, means the voice coil can move a long distance and still be completely captured by the magnetic field. And it gives you some advantages in linearity. So I thought that was neat. They played a pretty good amount of bass. This speaker is made out of granite, and I think it's stained to get this color, but again, it's like 500 pounds. And sounded okay. Not my cup of tea. There's an arm coming out here, teal. I believe it's not related to teal speakers, which I think are THIEL, but no E. And the interesting thing about this, it's a tangential tracking arm, but it's tangential by the dint of having two pivots. Here's a point, and here's a connection point, and here's the other connection point. And you can see it's almost a parallelogram kind of thing, but they didn't have this actual playing anywhere. They just had this display or this advertising out. So I thought that was interesting, as opposed to the linear tracking, tone arms that we've seen on, a couple turntables like Rabco and Technics and Harman Kardon and things like that. Focal was there. This is their Grand Utopia. It's one of their high-end speakers. And this is the subwoofer, and it ports out the bass of the speaker here. And this produced a lot of sound. This face and this face are ahead of this face, so that they claim to have time-aligned the drivers and so forth. And they made really good sounding bass, and I mean all the way up. They drew a lot of people. This room was always very busy, and it was driven by these NAIM amps, which are very cool. They're very large. This is like 2.5 foot high and almost 2 foot wide. And these are the heat sinks here. And yeah, this is not an optical illusion. They are sculptured, machined in and out, so that they have this wave sort of pattern here, and they look really nice. But it's a lot of money. And they paid attention to the room handling. They used diffusers. They have curtains. They had a big, like 50 by 50 foot room, which was divided in the middle with this curtain, another one on the other side here. They had diffusers on both sides, bass traps in the back, and from the mid-range up, they pretty much attenuated the reflection, so that was very useful. Dynaudio had a nice display. Again, 50-foot square room, and these curtains all around, and these speakers are far away from the walls, so very little going on in the way of reflections. The sound was very clear, but maybe a little high in the 500 hertz to 2 kilohertz range, a little hump in the response maybe, but very low distortion, very listenable, and very wide dispersion. The first part of the demo, I was sitting in front of the right-hand speaker here. I could easily hear the left-hand speaker. I'm maybe 10, 12 feet away. So a good off 45 degrees to the left, I heard the left speaker nearly the same level, and the image was clear and distinct. And I think this is why. I think this is a cast plastic. I don't know if it's one of those artificial stone things, but look at what they did. This is sort of flat, straight back, but this part they have sculpted inwards. So this is a tweeter here, and this is maybe 6 inches wide across here, maybe 5.5, and it gets wider and wider as it has to handle the woofers. And I think that's part of the dispersion tricks that they played, which worked well. It's a nice sounding speaker. Legacy. I didn't pay attention to Legacy last time because they make these monstrosities looking speakers, but this time I listened and I had to say it sounded pretty good. It has a shitload of drivers. I mean, where's my cursor? That's an AMT, and then there are some mid-ranges here, and there's a woofer behind here, and subwoofers and sub-subwoofers, and there are passive radiators on the back. Do I got a picture of the back? No, I don't. And amps. This thing has 5 amplifiers in each one, and a lot of power, and it sounded pretty good. I assume that there's DSP in there, because I think it would be rather hard to design a speaker that's that complex with conventional crossovers. Any rate, they weren't playing anything that had really deep bass in it, but again, it was strong bass, chest pounding when the kick drums came in, and so it was probably pretty good. But they didn't really stress the system when I was there. It was springtime. This was the end of the first day. Springtime in Chicago, and things are blooming, and it's just outside of my hotel there. So the next day, I started going to rooms. This is a hotel room, and they have curtains over the glass windows. All these rooms have large glass windows, which I don't think they opened. Some of them might have had balconies, but I'm not sure. Anyway, Magnepan is there. They're one of my favorites. It's magnetic planar, and they have a new model of the 2.7, and sounded really good. I like them. Hanawa was there, our friend Bob Bean, who's presented a couple of times and who I talked to while I was there. And he's invited us back to Hanawa in Marlborough, I think it is. This is his speaker system, and now they have 2 different sizes of full range drivers here, a 5 and a 7. Those are options, and they come with subwoofers. And they have tweaked the design to take more advantage of their digital Class D amplifiers. These speakers have 1 ohm impedance, and so their amps, which is this guy here, is one of their integrated amps, has to produce a huge amount of current. It produces 20 amps of output, and it's a gallium nitride design operating at 1.5 megahertz, switching, if you want to call it switching speed. And that's the highest I know. But the amp is chock full of DSP, and they've improved the sound of this speaker. And I remember the first time we went to listen to them, I said, this thing is honky, because this is, it looks like a salad bowl here. It's just within a dish, but this time it did not sound honky at all. So they have improved the EQ, they have improved the integration, and they have relieved this driver of having to do bass. Now this isn't a great subwoofer. I think it's a Sony, to tell you the truth. But it comes and it's integrated, and it does a good job down to a reasonable low frequency now. So it sounds pretty good, and it's 28 grand. I mean, that's not chicken feed, but that includes the amp, the subwoofers, and the speakers. They have revised their turntable somewhat. Like I said, it looks like a reasonable design. It's not this fantasy towers or whatever. And the price is kind of high, but not crazy high. But what is really interesting is this tone arm. This is their new tone arm, and it's 3D printed. And guess what? The cartridge is 3D printed, and I don't know out of what, but their cartridge right here is a moving coil cartridge, similar to what they've had, and they've reduced it to the elemental basics. It has one turn. It is 0.1 ohms. And after you get out of this cable, it has to go to their interface box, which is the only thing on the planet that will take a 0.1 ohm source signal and transform it into a phono cartridge, moving magnet phono cartridge level, 5 millivolts kind of per centimeter type of thing. And it sounded really clean. He played some records, and he played full selections, which I love. And you know, these records are not perfect, and they have ticks and pops, but the cartridge seemed to attenuate that. And he claimed it's because their switching amp sees the transient and passes just the transient and doesn't let any ringing happen, and the cartridge doesn't ring, and the ticks were just like tick and extreme high frequency, but gone in a microsecond. And it sounded cleaner than other phono setups. I can't really explain it, but it really did. I was impressed. There's this company called Danville Signal, and people told me, you got to hear them, you got to hear them. So I went there, and the room was packed. I had to wait to get in. I had to wait to find a reasonable seat, and they put on a 20-minute sort of show that they repeated over and over. And I finally got to see it and hear their spiel and stuff. These are smaller Magnepan speakers, 1.7s or something like that. And Danville's thing is they do DSP. They don't have any more pictures. They have these digital amps that they will be coming out with, 4 channels each. And I think that's what these black boxes are. And they're DSP boxes. They come in different models. This is the 2/8, which means stereo input, 8 outputs. And it's for having 2 4-way speakers. And their DSP, they do crossovers, they do EQ, delay, DSP response correction, and all that kind of stuff. Everything you want to do, possibly in DSP. And what's interesting about it is that you can get from them, and I think it's free, an application which allows you to control your own DSP. You can get one of these boxes loaded with the DSP for this speaker, or a dozen other speakers that they have already created the curves and crossovers and all that kind of stuff for. But you can roll your own. So you can reroute signals in the DSP and make it 2 inputs to 4 2-ways, or you can divide up the lows and the highs any way you want and any number you want. And this is an interesting kind of power and tool to give to your customers, because I bet you it's a lot easier to screw up than to get right. But they will provide you over the phone support, and they can connect. If you have one of these in your home, they can connect to it over the internet and help you configure it. So what happened was they had the system set up so that you could listen to a track, and they could switch between DSP and straight, which meant the passive crossovers, which are in the bottom of these speakers, to show us the improvement that they made. And it's quite astonishing. The biggest thing was the mid-range moved from sort of a recessed kind of sound to a slightly forward kind of sound, and all the instruments were cleaned up and they stood out individually. It's like bright, shiny, and sparkling all of a sudden, and it was very impressive. And the DSP box cost $4,000, which is not out of line with the DEQX and the other kinds of DSPs that you can buy. And they're using top-notch components and design inside. They had these units on a side table open for inspection. And it was very impressive stuff. Really something to consider if you really want to get the last bit out of your speakers. Mobile Fidelity recently, well, 4 or 5 years ago maybe, hired this fellow named Andrew Jones, who worked at ELAC and at Technical Audio Devices, TAD and KEF, and has quite a name for himself as a speaker designer. And he likes coaxial designs, and so his first product for mobile fidelity was a 10-inch version of this. This is a newer, smaller 8-inch version, 8-inch woofer with a 1 1/4 inch coax inside. And you know, you look at this and say, gee, I don't think this will work, but it really does. It's ported out the back, and it produces some good bass. And as you move around in this, the sound field stays nailed to this cone because they are coaxial and time aligned. It works. I mean, I bought some small KEF speakers that are coaxial, and I noticed that about them. When I move my head from side to side, the image doesn't change. My perspective on it changes, but the sound doesn't change. And I thought that was pretty cool. His latest version is this, the 888, which is the same speaker you saw before is here, but now he's got a couple of 8s, and they produced a lot of bass. And this is Andrew here, and he spent his time talking to people and telling stories, war stories. He was very funny. He was a very personable person, and that was a lot of fun. Final, not our final screen here, but Final is a company that makes electrostatic speakers, and this is their latest model, the Model 15. And it's electrostatic, and these are perforated panels. There's one in the front, one in the back. And where you see these dark areas here, there are no perforations there. And I asked them what that's about, and they said, we use that to create the segmentation for different frequency ranges. And he wasn't specific as to whether, for example, there's a strip of rubber behind this touching the diaphragm to literally physically segment the diaphragm. But anyway, the diaphragm is divided up somehow into these vertical lines so that you have narrow radiating elements that give you wider dispersion. And just for grins, these are custom subwoofers. There's one on each side, made by Tecton, which is a newish sort of company that makes really good drivers. And I think the price was like 14 for the electrostats only, 14,000 a pair, and they're 7 foot high and very high tech looking and very nice sounding. They only played jazz. They didn't play anything demanding. I didn't hear the subs kick in, so I don't even know if they were turned on or not. But very clean. I mean, as electrostatics usually are when they're not overstressed. Orchard Audio is a company that make this Class D amplifier here, and this is the high-end version called the Star Crimson. Was playing with these CSS speakers, and I stopped in to see Leo, but he wasn't in this room. I don't know where he was, but I didn't see him at any rate. And they played loud, and it was clean, no distortion, no noise. I put my ear up against the tweeters, and no hiss. And that's something that digital amps seem to have conquered. They have virtually no noise output, which is a good thing. Somebody? No? This was one of the more interesting, odd maybe, speakers. This is the Porzilli Audio Note. And 48 little tiny drivers are 1 1/4 inch. In the minimum cabinet, it's like 2 inches across and 2.5 inches deep. And there's some controversy here. A subwoofer is required, by the way. And this is included. This is a little SVS dual 6-inch subwoofer. I heard somebody say, and I cannot tell you if it was Porzilli or the distributor or Showman or whatever, that the enclosures are heated to, he said, reduce the driver compliance. I would say to increase the driver compliance, i.e. to make the suspensions floppier so that they resonate at lower frequencies. I touched the back of the cabinet. It seemed a little warm, and they were not playing loud. And in their frequency range, you're limited to above 180 hertz, you wouldn't have to put in lots of power. I don't think it would be speaker heating kind of power. So it seemed that maybe they are warmed up, but I didn't see any extra. It was like 2 terminals on the back here connecting to the amp, and I didn't see any extra terminals going to a DC power supply or something like that. So I don't know if that heating stuff was gas. Anyway, it requires equalization, and you can buy an analog equalizer from them, or they'll give you the curves on DEQX. Each of these little drivers get the same signal, so there's no signal shading going on, which means they're not controlling the response. And when you get a big line of identical drivers with identical signals, it sounds a little funny. You may recall, because I can't recall, Dayton Audio was selling a speaker made of like 23-inch drivers and like 40 half-inch tweeters, and maybe it was a Don Keel design, and it was curved back, and it was shaded, and it made a good acoustic signal for a room that allowed them to get a good image off the floor, so doubling the frequency response out of it because they got a good reflection. But this doesn't do any of that. The room used several sound panels. These are shown on the left to kill the first reflection off the speakers. And there were some, the back wall is down here, if you can see my mouse pointer, some panels back there. So they attempted to control the sound of the room, but it didn't all come together. I think they need to work on the integration of the sub and this thing, and maybe some more EQ work. But they were interesting little speakers. Well, I shouldn't say little. Matasound and Parts Express are there. This is the Matasound's display of their high-end drivers. And one of the ones they showed, this is a woofer from Purify. And if you look at these, the suspension for this thing, this is the latest thing from Purify. And there are things that stick out like mountain ranges here, and there are like valleys here. And when this cone goes in and out, these things flex. And they flex in such a way that when the cone is going in, the valleys come out, and when the cone is going out, the mountains come down. And their claim is that the total area represented by the surround remains constant as the woofers pump in and out. And it's very disturbing looking to watch how this surround flexes when this thing moves. I saw this in a YouTube thing. They didn't demonstrate it here. And you got to wonder if this thing is for real, but these guys are using high power physical modeling tools to come up with this, and they claim this is the latest thing. And we'll see. I don't think anybody but Purify makes surrounds like this. We'll see if it spreads out into the industry, whether through copying or licensing. I just don't know, but it's definitely interesting to look at. And these valleys and mountains are very soft. You can deform them easily with your fingertip, Another interesting thing, SB Acoustics have been around for a while and do a lot of interesting drivers. They even have a series of hemp drivers, but they have this open source speaker system, and you can go and download the plans for this, and SB Acoustics will be happy to sell you the drivers for this. And it's reminiscent of JBL L100 or the Century, and they sounded really good, but they only guarantee the sound if you use their drivers, and of course if you stick to the design. But the design is free. It can be reproduced commercially, but you got to use their drivers, which is where they're going to make their money. So but it was pretty cool. I like this one. Okay, here's the view. This is a little stand for a Magnapan speaker which this is the speaker here, and it incorporates a subwoofer. So this is the Magnepan speaker here that we see here, and right here is the outlet of the subwoofer in the front, and the subwoofer faces the rear and also is a dipole woofer, so it exits out the rear. And so it's a stand and subwoofer, and this here is a Dayton or Parts Express Class D amplifier with DSP built in. So for $845, you get this stand and a subwoofer and an amplifier and a DSP preloaded with the right correction curves to blend into this this is a Magnepan LRS, I believe. And it made a substantial difference, added the low end, and it was sounded very nice because it's a dipole subwoofer. It won't play huge loud because the dipole is self-canceling, but they give you this tunnel, which is a little over a foot here. So it's good to, 60, 70 hertz. And then it's falling off, but it's lifted with EQ. And it sounded really nice. And it's pretty reasonably priced, and one of the lowest priced things at the show. This is a smaller version of that Clarisys electromagnetic panel, and this is where I got the scoop from the guy. I talked him into getting some details, and he said there was this old guy from Magnepan that came in, and he gave us some ideas of how to do some stuff, and I got from him that the guy might have been Leo Spiegel. Leo Spiegel was at Apogee. He was the guy who invented the signature version of the Duetta, the Diva, the Stage, 3, maybe 4 models. And he reworked the crossovers and reworked the drivers, and the cabinets stayed the same, but he came out with something that was smoother and easier to drive. And anyway, so these guys had some help from Apogee, but they didn't want to talk about that. These sounded better than the bigger ones, frankly, because they're simpler. I think that's the secret there. Linkwitz. I spent some time in the Linkwitz room. I talked to Frank Brenner, who's their president now. And unfortunately, there's kind of a dark room, so you don't get to see all the details. There's a pair of 10-inch dipole subwoofers here. This is an 8-inch dipole, a 3-inch dipole, and 2 tweeters, one facing forward, one facing back. So you see there's a tweeter here, there's a tweeter in the back behind this part. And they come in different materials, and you can buy kits of drivers, kits of loudspeakers, fully assembled loudspeakers, and they do very special things because they're a very carefully designed dipole speaker from subwoofer all the way to tweeter. And their claim to fame is this is a 4-channel amplifier, or maybe 5 channels, with DSP and equalization. It's made specifically for this, a special cable from the amp to the speaker. And for 28 grand, you'll get a pair of these speakers and a pair of these amps and crossovers and DSP. And that's a pretty good value. These things play extreme low bass, loud, and when you give them a natural recording, i.e. 2 microphones, you get a natural sound field out of them, and nobody else does it better, I gotta say. And it was very relaxing. I spent about half an hour listening to these, and it's very relaxing because they're like no gimmicks. It just came out natural. He's playing nice jazz stuff, female vocal with piano. He played some symphonic stuff, but many symphonies, many orchestras, I should say, are recorded with multiple microphones, which will come out fine on these, but not as special as just 2 single mics. So I love these things, and that's why I spent so much time there. Back to one of these big hall multiple exhibitor kind of things. I came across these. These little things are speakers. They meant to fit in this bag with a pair of stands, and I think there's like a pair of 3-inch maybe 2.5-inch woofers here. I don't think that there was a tweeter, but maybe one of them has a tweeter built in or something. And they sound pretty good from 100 hertz on up. You sit on a chair in the display here. There's a chair down here. You sit and you're in the sound field of these things, and they make a pretty good, credible sound field and fairly flat response from 100 hertz on up. $400 a set. While I was back in that room, I hooked up with Bill Sweet, which is a member of the Chicago Audio Society, who I met last time. He was very friendly. He said, "Oh, you got to hear this and go see those." And this was one of the ones that he mentioned, TNA speakers. And like I say here, get your mind out of the gutter. This is the larger of the new Solitaire series, and it has a lot of moving parts, and not all the best design choices with them. It's hard to see, but there's a ribbon tweeter here and 4 elliptical mid-ranges here, and 2 woofers here and 2 woofers on the other side. So they are cross-firing. Vibration cancellation, powered by big TNA amps and a TNA electronics CD player and streamer. But they were playing again soundscapes and things like that. Nothing full spectrum, nothing challenging. And when you stood up, the highs went away, because this is like 36 inches here, or maybe they're 40 inches tall. For that kind of money, you shouldn't be forced to sit only. They sounded okay, nothing special, I'm sorry to say, but they were one of the buzzes of the show. This is a new series for them, and they have smaller ones with 2 8-inch or 9-inch woofers on the side, and one with a 9-inch woofer on the front, and YG acoustics, kind of a standard. They have all aluminum cabinets. The drivers are machined from solid aluminum plugs. The cones are, and they do it right. I like MTMs, and they're central to their design. And the subwoofers are well integrated. And Lynn came out recently with these 800-watt monoblocks. They really kick ass, and they are quiet and they sound good. And of course, you're not going to strain them. And YG played pretty good attention to sound absorption and stuff in the room. So they got really nice sound out of them. I really respect this company. MBL. This is an Omni speaker, and there's 1, 2, 3 Omni drivers. They say this is a woofer. I don't remember the crossover points. That's a tweeter. And these things work, and they really are Omni. These are like segments of an orange peel that you reassembled, and you sit it on a table and fix the bottom end, and you push on the top end. These guys will bow out, whatever. And if you pull on them, they will bow in. So they expand and contract, as do these and these. And this ported subwoofer is Omni because bass is Omni. So these are really Omni top to bottom. And they sound pretty good. But the thing is, with an Omni speaker, you'll get a reflection from here and here and here and everywhere. So sorry. Is that a good thing? I don't know. If you got the right room set up, or if you particularly like having reflections come from everywhere, then this works. But they sound pretty flat. There's no jumping in the frequency range as strings play higher, lower, or whatever. They sounded pretty nice, and they're powered by giant amps, so no lack of power. This was a newer design, kind of curious here. Cylinder, a 12-inch woofer for bass, This is like a 6-inch or something like that woofer facing up on the other end of the cylinder. And there's a conical reflector. It was like silvery metal. I don't know if it's metal, it might be silvered plastic here. And a set of vanes around the circumference of the speaker here. Here you're looking at them edge on, as you know, you see more and more of the surface area. So that they direct the sound out in a circular fashion. And when I was there, the person in charge was not there, so they weren't playing. And I don't know, they're reminiscent of some other sort of Omni type, you know, let's point it at a conical director kind of designs. They are coming up with a newer, well, I think it's a dipole. I know these are dipoles. This may be a cardioid. I don't know if this panel here in the front lets sound through or not, but it's reminiscent of the Linkwits. They have a pair of 10-inch woofers and a mid bass and an AMT tweeter, and it has amps and DSP. It's only going to be 15 grand, but these were not hooked up. They're on display only. So looks interesting, but we'll have to wait to see. Another sort of dipole speaker, which again I didn't get to hear. I don't know anything about the price. The interesting thing is that the subwoofer is an Omni. It's not a dipole. It's a sealed cabinet. So they decided that this lower woofer, they would make it a cardioid response, and these are definitely dipoles. Are open in the back. Maybe they think that a cardioid matches an Omni sealed woofer to a true dipole mid and tweet. Don't know. Didn't hear them, so can't say. A glass speaker, anybody? This is sort of a cube, and this is a bass subwoofer pedestal. As you can see, they like the concept of opposing drivers here for force cancellation, vibration cancellation. So 2/8 and 2/8 in the bass cabinet, and they call this stuff perfect glass, but I don't know if it's really glass or plexiglass or whatever. Again, these guys have side to side force canceling mid basses and a tweeter in the front. They sounded okay. I don't know anything about the price. I'm not sure I'm much into the look, but they might be good. Bob Carver was there. I didn't get a picture. Bob Carver was not there. Bob Carver Productions or company was there, and I saw his 285 2 amp. It looks like the other tube amp I showed, but it was set up to drive some small magnepans, and they used it with a subwoofer so that the amplifier didn't have to pass low frequencies, didn't have to put out a lot of power, and maybe that's how they covered the fiasco of the 275 a few years ago, which was rated for 75 watts a channel, but it turned out it had 15-watt output transformers, and they saturated and distorted like crazy. These sounded okay on low-level jazz. It's the most I can say. I saw some old friends like Bill Sweet, I mentioned the Chicago Audio Society, and he told me that they were founded on our principles. They came a couple of years after us. I thought that was interesting. And I saw Walter Swanbon, who is from Fidelis AV up in New Hampshire. And I saw Bob Bean from Hanawa, and of course Frank Brenner from Linkwitz Audio. And I met new friends. Everybody was really friendly. I mean, of course, the showmen and the distributors and all that, and even some designers when they were handy. But the average attendees were meeting in clusters, which formed dynamically in the corridors, and saying, hey, did you hear this? And what do you think about this kind of sound? And these guys are playing great music, and I heard some great stories. It was a lot of fun. One of the things I did, I spent some time talking to an organization called the Audiophile Foundation. And I suggest that you look them up and think about them. Here is their website, audiophilefoundation.org. They are a meta group. They are a group of groups. And what they offer is organization and support for local area audio clubs. And what that means is that they will do membership. They will take care of dues. Their dues are $30 a year. Their organization is such that they can hold Zoom meetings free, but if there's an in-person meeting, they charge the $10 to $20 an attendee, and that goes to the support of the meeting, whether it's snacks or AV equipment or whatever they might need to put on the meeting. They have a group chat, sort of bulletin board function like groups.io has. And, they're asking us, they talked to me asking if the BAS would like to join and become a regional member, which means there would be a BAS subgroup and BAS personal members paying dues. And you got to ask what we collect dues for ourselves. The dues that we collect go for sometimes equipment, sometimes snacks, sometimes they go to publishing, the BAS speaker, and other expenses we have. Sometimes we have them when we have people come talk to us. What do we do about that? I mean, our expenses don't go away even if we join such a group. But the question is whether it's could be or would be part of our future. And I honestly, I got to say, it's something we need to think about, because our work, the work that we do to keep the BAS running and functioning and working as well or poorly as you might think it does, it's a lot of work. And these guys could take some of that work off us, and it might accomplish some of our functions better. Another thing that I don't have here, it's not part of this talk, but there's this Google function called groups.io, which Google puts out, and I think you create these virtual groups that cost money over a certain size. If it's 100 people or more, it may cost $5 a year, $10 a year. So I don't know. But it harkens back to the bulletin board kind of function where people post topics and other people can respond to those topics. And a topic can embed links and photos, and it makes it easier to have a discussion about certain things. And Chris Hart of the Connecticut Audio Society has offered to me in the past a couple times to create a groups.io system or group or whatever for the BAS. And I have asked him to go ahead and do it a couple of times, and he has not done it. I have spoken to David Moran, who manages some groups on groups.io for other groups, and I asked him to create a BAS groups.io, and he has not done it. And I don't know why. They're busy. I've heard rumors that David Moran is hurt in an automobile accident. At any rate, the thing is, these groups allow a free form, i.e. one member to another on demand conversation. I mean, in printed form, internet form, whatever you want to call it. I mean, you could call each other, but you might not know each other's phone numbers. Again, it seems to me that might be a valuable part of BAS, and I hoped that we would have it by now, but we don't. And it takes some qualifications for Google to be able to create groups, and I don't have those qualifications, at least at this time. So that's another thing that we should talk about. These two things, groups.io and Audiophile Foundation, the groups that I know that use it are maybe much more social than we are. They talk to each other. These guys get together for drinks and parties. I don't know if that's a part of our of the BAS of our personalities or not, but without it, we don't do that, not really. So it's something to think about here. I wonder whether there's a path to the future for us through that. So BAS and Expo, I brought a big stack of BAS speakers, our publication, and a stack of the BAS flyers. And the BAS flyers, I hand stamped them with a custom made stamp that said introductory offer, $25 first year membership. So that's half price because we're now up to $50 a year. And every day I took a third of each of my stacks, so 3 inches of speakers and a third of an inch of BAS flyers, and I spread them on the 3 tables at the entry to the exposition hall where all the other literature was spread out. And every day, after a couple hours, they were all gone. Now, I don't know if people I saw some people picking some of them up, but it's also possible that somebody from the show came along and said, this doesn't belong here, and put them in a wastebasket. Now, I did have an arrangement with Liz Smith, who is one of the marketing directors of AXPONA, that we have permission to do this, and she told me, don't do it first thing in the morning because the tables are full of stuff, and they want people to have room to spread their stuff out. So I waited till there were gaps there. But I don't think we got any subscriptions out of this. Dave Hadaway, did we get any subscription out of this? Probably not. Anyways, so that's kind of a bust, our attempt at marketing. Friday and Saturday evenings, they have live music presented from 7 to 8:30, something like that. In again, a big hall, 100 by 200 feet anyways, with sound reinforcement, and it's well done. They were well mic'd, not crazy. Levels were not too loud. It was very clean and very pleasant. And boy, that's the way sound reinforcement should be done. And the acts were pretty good. Jazz guitarist the first night, and a female pop folk sort of duet second night. And this is what I come away with. All high-end speakers seem to weigh 500 pounds each. And the high end is really high, so high. You know, a couple $100,000 for a pair of speakers seems to be de rigueur in the high end. But I tell you, you can get good sound for a couple of kilobucks, sometimes even less. So I'm not put on, you know, I don't have to go out and buy gigantic speakers to have good sound. A set of decent headphones, and there was 30 or 40 headphone stands in there's one ballroom dedicated to headphones, and 30 or 40 vendors selling all kinds of headphones, headphone amps, and stuff like that. A good set of headphones is a really good investment to make. It keeps your head straight about what your system sounds like. It doesn't do the same thing as having speakers, no question about it. And I got to have speakers, but when I can't have speakers, good headphones, and you know, good headphones is $100. Will get you 90+% of the way there. Wear your hearing protection if you ever go to loud places. And finally, try as I could, I only saw about a third to maybe half of the show. I got the program, looked at all the vendors. I checked off all the vendors I wanted to go see, and I basically just made it through those. On Sunday, I was flying through the last few halls that I hadn't seen any particular vendors of, just to look indoors and give a list and say, is this good? Is this bad? Is this interesting? It's a huge show, and you can't expect to cover it all, and I'm satisfied with what I did get to see, because it's fun. And that's it. Now, how do I unshare? Stop share. Ha! Any questions? No. Cool. David?
Who, me?
Yeah, question?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I think you probably couldn't have done it there, but I read stereophile, as probably most of us will admit to, if
Yep.
push comes to, and I'm going back in history, probably 50 years ago, the BAS did an amplifier clinic and concluded that operated within their power ranges, they all sounded alike, and any differences would be attributed to frequency response. Does that sound right to you, Al? Yeah. And yet, I always read about this amp sounds great with that, and these cables. Were you able to make any sense out of any of that? Did you? I mean, I especially like the one where the cables cost more than the speakers.
Yeah.
Could you make any sort of judgment about that at the show?
The answer is I think so. Tube amps, unless they are truly heroic, and by that I mean giant, expensive, high power, so forth, tend to have a higher output impedance, especially at lower frequencies. And so they interact more with speakers. What you'll find is that tube amps with speakers will exhibit an elevated bass response. And they may also exhibit a depressed treble response. Depends on with electrostatics, for example, the frequency, the impedance of the speaker at high frequencies goes down to like an ohm or below. And again, the tubes with higher output impedance will interact with that. And the only things that cables will do is if they have heroic construction, by that I mean lots of copper, they will have low impedance connection from whatever they connect from and connect to. And so in theory, they will step out of the way of causing impedance variation. If you use a skinny wire, you've introduced impedance into that circuit of the output and the cable and the speaker, and you allow more fluctuations in the response. But if you ask me, 12 gauge Romex power wire is 99 point something% of the game. The difference between that and these exotic speaker cables is not worth it. Now, one of the games that exotics did play was you had these blobs at the ends of the cable. I mean, some were little blobs, maybe 2-inch cubes, and some were like 10 inches long and 4 inches wide and 2 inches deep. And they claimed to have equalizing networks in there, impedance equalizing networks, which may or may not have worked, but one network would be different for different amps and different for different speakers, and which ones did you get and how do they work? So I don't know if I think those are all scams. So in general, I'm a solid state guy because their normal parameters are they have very low output impedance. And so there's no interaction with speakers or wires. It's just that problem just goes away. And that's about the only thing I could get to say about them. Tubes have other issues. They generate lots more heat. They age. Tubes are hugely expensive to replace. And, some amps they claim 10 years and some amps they say 2 years. And an ongoing expense of $500 to $1,000 for a tube set, that's not inconsiderable. So that's just my take on it. Some people love tubes and claim sweetness and all that kind of stuff. I've been able to find all I want in solid state amps.
Yeah. A show like that probably is not a good place to make that sort of a judgment anyway, I guess.
It's too many variables.
Yeah.
Yep. You're right.
Nick, were open baffle speakers all the rage there?
There were several. Let's say, commercial dipoles like Magnapan. Martin Logan was on display there. I didn't get a picture, but they had a very nice sounding hybrid with electrostatic panel and a cardioid woofer. And I saw some unconventional ones that were like tree slabs with a subwoofer, 15-inch sub on the bottom and a 15-inch full range on the top. And I didn't care so much for those. I showed you a few examples of prototype dipole speakers and maybe cardioid. Not clear about the response. And of course, the very successful ones like the Linkwits. There's a variety of dipole or non-box type speakers there to be, auditioned, and some of them are terrific. I think the Linkwits is a terrific. LX521 is the model. And a bargain, consider they come with crossover DSP and amps. So.
Nothing wrong with it. No,
Anybody else?
honestly, I find it.
Oh, I got a question. How much longer do you think exfoliant will exist, or will it continue to grow?
I think it's going to continue to grow. That's been his track record. And when I went, it was still a tail end of COVID. It was over 6,000 people there. This was noticeably more crowded. I think the manufacturers are coming back to doing some sort of centralized marketing, i.e., we're all going to be together in this big place and everybody can see everything. And of course, an individual attendee can't see everything. But if you choose the things you're interested in, you can get to see most of them. And you might hear or see or whatever some surprises along the way too.
Well, but what about the audience? I mean, you and I know that You Do It Electronics has just announced their closing.
Yep.
Radio Shack went away some time ago.
Yep.
And locating good, either the audience is dying, that's people like us, or the Amazons of the world have completely stolen our lunch, or the lunch that used to are us or something.
I think it's both of those and more. There's more internet sales, in direct sales, whatever going on. There are fewer stereo stores around, and the stereo stores are selling more and more high-end stuff that I think, the average people aren't interested in. So the average person is left with things like Best Buy and maybe Amazon and so forth. But Best Buy, you can go to a Best Buy and hear a selection of things. They don't have a huge number of speakers, but you can hear some Klipsch's and Boston Acoustics and whatever they carry. Mirage. I think the market has changed, the marketing has changed, the distribution has changed, the margins have changed. It's all part of globalization. And that's kind of why I think AXPONA may continue, because it's
got a niche.
It's a niche, but you can still go see a lot of things there for not too much money. You can go for a day for $10 or something like that, I think. You can talk to anybody and get guidance as to what you should go see once you give them the general parameters of what you're playing with. So I think it's potentially a good marketing move for people to do it. I mean, CES used to have a lot of audio stuff. And as you and I recall, that CES audio stuff was well attended when they had it. So the CES audio stuff has moved to AXPONA, and there's going to be other ones like it, other audio shows, and they seem to be thriving.
I wonder, how old were the people that you saw? Did you see many people there in their 30s?
Yes.
You did? Oh, that's a surprise.
Well, let me qualify it. There are lots of younger people there. Those people seem more focused on headphones. It's, it may be, I can't think of the right word, but the headphone booths were full of younger people, the 20s and 30s. And the people in the big speaker, big amp kind of rooms were older. There's a absolutely definite segmentation of the market there by that.
With some of those ridiculous prices of both speakers and amps and cables, do all of them have a home evaluation program?
I don't know. I would hope so because nobody nobody should get locked into a purchase based on what they sound like in a showroom. I mean, that's not what your home is like at all. So it would be foolish if they don't have at least a return privilege.
Yeah.
But nobody talked specifically about that. It's just my belief that, you know, I certainly would not do it unless I could get my money back. And I don't mean store credit either.
Is video allowed at Exponia?
Um, I don't know that it's not allowed, but what I saw was a few, maybe 5 or less, TV screens, and nothing more than that, which were showing diagrams on a rotating basis or a demonstration. For example, the Danville Signal Company, the DSP guys, had a block diagram of the logical interconnection of their systems, how the two D to A's on the two A to D's on input were fed to DSP blocks, processing blocks like crossover filters and EQ and things to create different responses to the different output DSPs. And I could drag the output of this DSP block into the input of that DSP block and do things like that, which are, like I said, is much easier to screw up than to get right. And they were showing that this is like a development software of theirs, which the customers can get when you buy the high-end unit. But mostly they're, here's a picture of the inside of the speaker, here's a picture of the crossover, here's a picture of the cabinet being finished, and 10 pictures on a rotating basis showing something about a product that's on display. That's it. That was the only kind of video stuff that I saw. Nothing like here's a new TV screen or a new screen for your projector or anything like that. It's all about audio. Which I'm good with. I like the fact that we're focused on audio here, damn it.
Yes, speaking about refunds on this, last year I bought a new CD player. Remember them from Upscale Audio, which is mail order and has stores in California. And I bought stuff from them before, but and of course I'm on their mailing list and I open the mailings most days. But they're always talking about send it back. I did not send back the CD player I bought, even though it is for 5 times the price. It was no better than the Oppo that I had before that just gave up the ghost. But it appears that they will give you your money back if you don't like it after 30 days. But
that's
yeah.
good.
Yeah.
There is a trade in used audio gear of quality brands, and there are several you might call them storefronts, whatever, places in, a set of tables along one of the corridors where there's companies selling different cables or audio tape or used CD players or amplifiers or records or a whole variety of things. And there are several such areas at the show. So from that, I gather that there, decent used equipment can get turned around and at a profit. So it makes sense that stores would take stuff back because they can sell it at a somewhat lower price as a used, refurbished, whatever the labels they want to put on it, and it helps them, helps their customers. Good thing all around. I stayed away from those places. I could have easily bought some stuff there. I mean, but I didn't want to carry it back. So, anybody else? Well, I guess that's it, and in record time too.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're
I hope
welcome.
you had a good time out there. I think you did.
I did. Yeah, I went to dinner a couple of nice places. I met some nice people and heard some good stories. The hotel I stayed at had free breakfast.
Yeah.
And they had a cafeteria with mostly these little round tables, 2.5 feet across, whatever. And don't hold a lot of people, so these were all occupied, and they had this bench sort of table. So I sat there, and there were other people there. So I started talking to this guy, and he was older, maybe 60s, I don't know, grayish long hair, glasses. I think he had a corduroy jacket on, and he was telling me he used to be in the car audio, and he would get young teenagers with their first cars come in. I want a pounding system, and he knew what they needed, so he would install, a 1,000-watt amplifier and 4 12-inch woofers and do it all up. But what he did, because he was really a quality guy at heart, when these things played loud, the car rattles, right? So he's tightening bolts and putting down sealant and stuff like that to reduce the noise, so you get just a pure sound. So he does this for one of his customers, who comes back a little while later, says, it's not pumping right, it's not rattling. So he tells the kid to go away, have lunch, and come back after lunch, and he'll be all set. And he told me that what he did was he went around back and he loosened the bolts on the license plate. So that when you got really a lot of bass coming out, the thing would rattle, but the rest of the car was silent. All right, and the kid was ecstatic about this. He charged the kid $100, like he had done a huge. So I heard stories like that from people. It was terrific. They were so friendly and nice. I mean, I love going out there. It's been twice. It's been a wonderful experience.
All right.
All
Okay.
right. Well, I guess that's about it. I don't see anything else in the chats that need to be addressed. So I think we're good unless there's anybody else. I declare this meeting closed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
Yeah.
See y'all later.